Welcome everybody back to Soul Stories. My name is Ariela HaLevi, and I'm so excited to introduce my guest today, Carissa Johnsen. Um, and when I invited Carissa on this podcast, I gave her one word, and that was God. And I believe that there is no preparation when you're in the energy of God, the energy of the divine. And so that's really my intention today, is to hear more about our experiences with God and share our experiences with God, and how it's, I believe, just kind of watching you, that it's changed your life. And sometimes it's hard to hear the messages, and well, it's not hard to hear the messages, it's hard to follow the messages and the guidance. um, but I knew that you were the one person that I could use the word God with, because I have seen, and I don't know you that well in and out day to day, but I've seen so many changes, just kind of following your experiences. And the one thing that's always stood out in recent months for me with you is your courage to use the word God in social media. And I will say that has been you've been a really deep role model for me in being courageous. Instead of now, I also use that. And partly it's because of I've seen you do that, and it's just been an awakening for me to say that this is God's work. And God doesn't mean religion. It means something so much more. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh my God, I already feel the Holy Spirit. Truly, though, I feel really blessed and honored to have this conversation with you because I know the kind of woman that you are. I know the kind of spaces that you create, and I just feel how God gets to be brought back in the conversation. And it's been a really edgy and uncomfortable, liberating experience for me to use that word, especially over the last couple of years, and primarily in the spiritual space, ironically. So it's been a real journey, not only getting initiated into deeper contact with God, but also using that word and deepening my relationship. So I'm really honored to be here. And thank you so much for also having the courage to have this conversation openly with me. I feel that this is part of the wave and the ripple that gets to impact the collective when we're just openly having a conversation. Because in my experience and interpretation, which we'll get to, God is they who goes by 1,000 names and still remains a mystery, right? We really don't have full context as to what is God, who is God, but our desire to know God is eternal, is incessant, is endless, is both liberating and challenging. It is the most important relationship, and one that so many people have feared and so many people have been liberated from. So this conversation is needed. I feel super grateful to be a student of life in this work and to be humbled by God just working through me and giving me the opportunity to have these conversations. So I'm really eager to see where God takes us.
Great.
Mhm.
Why don't we drop into a prayer, and then we'll just move forward. I think that
Beautiful.
sounds really
Yeah.
nice.
Thank you.
So just allowing our listeners and ourselves to take some deep breaths. And part of this energy of the divine, of God, is to bring her into your body. Allow the body to share this beauty and the magic and the color of the one with 1,000 names or more. And we're just so grateful to you, God, for dwelling in our space today. We know that as we find more mystery, magic, and um, the energy of you in our earthly worlds, that our lives change. And sometimes it's challenging, and sometimes, most of the time, it ends up amazing. And we are so grateful that in this podcast, which is so much more than a podcast, in this experience of God, that you dwell within our words, our energy, our emotion, our love. and that we just connect to you to speak your words, to allow your words to move through us. And to truly live heaven on earth is to listen and hear and know God with all of our hearts. And so we find deep gratitude in this space as we move forward. Oh,
Oh, amen. Beautiful
amen.
prayer.
Amen.
Hmm.
Thank you. I'd
Hmm.
love to hear, I know you've been on a journey, and I'd love to hear a little bit about, obviously who you are, but also more of like, how has your relationship with the divine changed your outlook on life, your relationships, I mean, it's a big question and we can move through it all. Um,
One
tell me
bite at a time.
everything. But I mean, specifically, I know you've been on a really deep journey this year.
Yeah.
And from what I can see, and I've read, that it's been really eye-opening for you and life-changing. And one of the things I can even feel, energetically from you is the depth that you carry, that you've always carried deep energy for the amount that I've known you, but this is very different. And I would love for you to speak to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Ah, yes. So these questions around like, who are you, become so beautiful and also so challenging for me, especially in this season, because a lot of what I've been deconstructing has been primarily around my attachment to my identity. And as I've gone through many seasons of that excavation, that deconstruction, I've kind of learned that the more I grasp onto that, it's like I suffer. And so I'll use these words so people can orient to my sense of self and work. But ultimately, a part of the conversation I really think is important in relation to this is recognizing that a lot of our suffering comes from our attachment to identity, to things and such. So I identify as being a spiritual mentor, as an oracle, and as an intuitive, but from the lens of being God-led. A lot of people identify in the psychic intuitive space as working with certain deities or working very much in the new age work. And I don't think that any of that is demonic or any of that is dark. I just think the clearest source and channel of energy that I've ever connected with is God. And my guides being Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, like that to me feels so pure and just it's changed my life. And I wasn't always this way. Growing up, my mom was very spiritual. And it wasn't until later years that I learned that I came from a lineage of seers in my family. So psychics and oracles, and, my sister's like a dream walker. And I didn't understand that I could have a relationship with God and not be religious. They felt, and I think that many people feel that, is that they feel that they can't have both. And, throughout the years, I've built a very successful business. In 2022, my business was really successful. I had team members, I had the penthouse, the magazine spreads, like all of it, and within a matter of months, it seemed like everything that I had built fell apart. And through that journey, which is part of when we connected, when I was like really in the midst of all of that, it was like I had to surrender everything that I had placed as more powerful than God, everything that I had pedestaled, everything that I believed was bigger than me or that had more power than me. I outsourced a lot of my power to these things. If I didn't have sold out private clients and I wasn't successful, if I didn't have $1 million, all the stories that I had created. And through the last, so that's been like 2022, 23, it's been like, 6 years around that time period. It started in 2020 and then really fell, in 2022. So it's been like 4 to 6 years of me really deepening in my relationship with God and letting God in and recognizing that I could have a relationship outside of God. And, initially it started with just being really curious. I was kind of like, how does the divine fit in all of these things? And so I studied a lot of ancient wisdom. I studied the shamanic work. I went into deeper esoteric wisdom around mysticism and Hinduism and, like Christian mysticism, even like all the ancient wisdom I felt like was fascinating to me. I wanted to devour it, but I couldn't really understand how it all like fit together. And as somebody who identifies really as a mystic, it was so beyond my mind. You know, I really wanted to understand beyond theology, but as a relationship as greater than religion. You know, so the last couple of years, which we can get into more of like what actually happened, is I was really in a place where I lost everything in order to regain everything, in order to recognize that everything that I was searching for in success, in money, in relationship, and material things, I was actually seeking as a deeper relationship with God. And the work that I do now really helps people touch that place where they identify with something or someone or whatever, and then they go through a really deep, dark night of the soul, awakening or transition, and they believe, you know, that it's God punishing them or that something really dark is happening, when actually I think in those moments it's a deeper call to connect with the divine that I don't believe is outside of us. I feel like that we connect with God through within us, which is why, you know, a lot of religions have actually externalized God and created an intermediary of like a priest can only hold his power or whatever. So, you know, I'll pause there in a minute, but I do think that, you know, the journey that I've been on was really losing everything that I have outsourced my power to in order to come in contact with this like unshakable, unwavering presence that exists within me, that is always available, always unconditionally loving, that needs nothing from me, that expects nothing from me, that is like this, it's like this nutrient that I feel like humanity is missing. One of my pieces of content that's gone the most viral in the last couple of years was me talking about people being spiritually malnourished. And I think that that's ultimately what it is. We're looking for it still in things when actually it's not through going outside of us, it's going deeper within.
So beautiful. I could go like 500 ways with what you just said. I mean, I think I'd love to touch on first and foremost is this spiritually undernourished or unnourished.
Yeah.
Um, it's come to my mind, and that's part of the reason why I really wanted you on the podcast, because I feel very much the same way. I think we've done a lot of yoga, which is beautiful, and meditation and healthy food, and we're pretty educated now on all the healing modalities, all the somatic work, all the work, even the shamanic work, right? We're so skilled, and yet we're bankrupt, right? We're still starving or climbing the walls, asking, "Is there more? Is there more? Is there more?" And I think you hit it. Um, we are that personal deep relationship with the divine is so fulfilling and so filled with love and challenge at times too, but isn't every relationship,
Oh my God,
right?
totally.
I mean, but I think that you hit it. There is this need for something deeper in our times that we're in. We're being called to something deeper, and it isn't about religion. It is about kind of what you said, which I have also done, which is like you did a deep dive into all these ancient texts and ancient wisdom, and it's exactly what I've done over the last, I mean, 25 years, but specifically in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, is if this is all there is, then I'm going to dig into the dirt to discover how they did it and what the wisdom keepers say, so that I
Hmm.
can discover that there's got to be more than this. Right.
Hmm.
And I think that's exactly what you're saying is like you dug down and then you kind of ingested it all and embodied it all and had to strip away all those labels and all those things you placed as like on the altar. And I can feel it, right? I can see it in you,
Mm.
how deep you are from it, because then everything on the outside is unattached. Right. And it's so I guess I'm just commenting on again
Mm.
how important it is to not to be stripped of it all. That may not be for everybody, right? That may not be somebody's path. But at some point, I feel like the divine sits us down and she's like, if this is all there is, then let me show you how to dive deeper, how to go
Mhm.
deeper and pull out something that is eternal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have a question. I just have like this,
I can
like,
comment on that.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
please.
because it
Please.
sparked so much within me. And I thank you for seeing me because I think it takes a real ability to be present to like really see that in people. And I think that, if you spot it, you got it. Like if you spot it within someone else, like you also reflect that same level of depth and divinity within you. And, I don't think that everyone has to lose everything in order to get to this place. I sort of knew years prior that this was like part of my soul contract, was to have this experience because this was my soul curriculum. I was meant to have great success, and I've lived this many lives. I know that this has been a common theme in my lives where I like have great success and then I get like attached to it and still think it's like mine, and then I get kind of taken to the underworld. And this is the last time I'm like I'm
Yeah,
integrating all this. This is the last time this is happening. I'm like we're rewriting this,
right.
but I think that I came here to experience that, and many people, their greatest challenge they will offer as medicine. And so now anyone can really sit in front of me and I can meet them in a lot of their pain and their suffering because I've also experienced it. It's not like I'm a theologian, or it's not like I'm, just read in scripture. I like have lived it, and I live it daily. It's a devotional practice to have this kind of relationship with God. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And, ultimately that's what I came here to do. I remember one of the things that stood out to me was when I had a very successful business and like my clients were crushing it, making millions of dollars, going viral on social media. The one of few testimonials that I received on this exact topic that struck me the most that I go back to was I remember a woman specifically telling me that she had church hurt and that she had left her church and never felt like she could have a relationship with God again after that. And my working with her helped her reconnect in that way. And like out of all the successful things I've done, all the accolades, that was the one thing that I like hold so near and dear, and is my life's work, is the thing that I'm here to do. And I think the spiritual malnourishment comes from, in some ways I think new age didn't have this intention. I think it was really beautiful in its own ways, kind of like feminism, right? It was like we had some of the right ingredients, but it didn't actually succeed in what its original intention was. Is that now it's become like we're using our relationship with the divine or with the laws of the universe to manifest more, and to think that once we manifest $1 million or we manifest this thing, then we'll be happy. And it's only when you actually experience those moments you realize like that doesn't actually make you happy. It's not actually having the thing, it's who you become in the process of creation. And sometimes it's who you become in the process of disillusion and of crumbling that really matters too. So I think the nutrient that we need, honestly, the most out of all of it is just presence. I think we're super distracted. And I think that ultimately, a lot of the questions that people come to me with when they're wanting to connect with God is, why do I feel so disconnected? Why do I feel like I'm not hearing the information and the answers? And I think that it's never that we're disconnected. It's just that we're distracted. And we're distracted by we're distracted by believing still with this like programming that, if we have this certain thing that we're going to stop the search. And so, the real path is we're really seeking, never seeking again is what it is. And that level of peace that comes from the end of seeking. And I think that that's why a lot of Buddhists and monks and, even some, real gurus, some of them, there's not an obsession about material wealth, but you can feel their transmission and their presence when you sit in front of them. And that's because they have this unknowing, ever present, available abundance, connection to abundance inside of them, and with or without, as above, so below. If you can really understand the energetics that are, we came here to master, it's not a game of just creation, it's a game of really surrender and to really experiencing life and not making meaning. For many years, I made the meaning that because I lost the business or it all crumbled, that I was a failure. And the more I attached to that meaning, also the more I suffered. So if you can just kind of, it's a dance between surrendering to how life is happening and co-creating with God, right? It's not a total surrender, do nothing. And that's the nuance and the balance that I think that we're learning how to navigate. And so it's, you know, there's so many nuances in this entire conversation. And I think it's really, you know, the exploration of who God is, what God means to us, and how we embody divinity will be the most important thing in the coming years with what I see that's going to continue to unfold, especially in the age of AI, because knowledge is no longer the most important, valuable thing that we have. It's our connection to God, because that can never be outsourced to AI. And it's our I don't want to say it's our responsibility, but it's like our greatest desire, like that some people are a little unconsciously to know God, and that is relational, not only with God, but seeing the divine in people, seeing the divine work and orchestrate in the things that are happening in our life. God is everywhere, in everything, and infused in everything. And so, yeah, I think that this is a real time to deepen our relationship because, you know, not that I'm a total doomsday or apocalyptic, but I do think with where humanity's going, our intuition, our ability to discern, and our ability to have faith will be the most important skill sets that we have.
I agree with you and everything you said. It actually, what you're saying, what you've said reminds me, I don't know if you remember, but our first year in the Shamanic Academy, we read The Presence Process by
Yep.
Michael Johnson, I think it is.
Michael Brown, I
Michael
think.
Brown. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a thick book, but it's so simple, right? It's about releasing everything that is noise. And it's a, I don't know, it's like an 8-week thing, or I can't even remember. I read it so long ago.
Yeah.
But really it's like what you're saying is like surrendering to the process of being human, and surrendering to the attachment of the things that I mean, and it's hard, and some of it is really hard, but in the experience of God, because I have a lot of people that come to me and they say, I can tell how you feel about the divine, but I don't know how to do that in my own life. And I think what you're saying, and we can expand on that, is number one, are you distracted? And how
Yeah.
distracted are you? Because we're all distracted. And so we're missing the beauty and the grace and the God within each other. So that is so essential. And I think another part of what he said was like, um, really being, like you said, as above, so below. So the more present you are here, the more you feel the
Mhm.
embodiment of the divine. And I think for a long time, the word God and the experience of God has been saved for four walls, right?
Yeah.
This is the religious experience of God. And I think that that is no longer where we are, even though religion plays a beautiful role if that is for you. And I love my religion and all that. But I think the embodiment of the divine is very personal, and to experience her is individual. But I guess my question also for you, because it is something that I get often, is like, really, how do we create that relationship? How do you do it?
Yeah. I get this question a lot too.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a relationship. So how do you create any
Yes.
relationship?
Yeah.
You have the intention of having a relationship. You
Mhm.
have the devotional practice. You have the ways that you show up even in the midst of things getting really challenging. That doesn't mean that you don't have questions. It doesn't mean you don't have repair. There's been so many times like I've repaired my relationship with God. You know, a couple days ago, I was really upset with God, and I was just like, I was just telling you offline, I just discovered mold in my home. And yet I felt like God led me to the home. And, I was in prayer, I checked in, and I was like, why would you lead me here? And what's interesting is that I think people also, like any other relationship, we project things onto God, too, that God needs to answer in a certain way, that God always needs like XYZ. And I think that that's where we can really develop a deeper self inquiry process of like, yeah, where are we projecting all this stuff on who God needs to be for us? And how can we actually, like a parent, allow God to be who God is for us naturally?
Yeah.
So when I first started deepening my relationship with God, it wasn't by choice. I will say that. I would say, well, it was like by choice, but it was the choiceless choice because my whole life was falling apart, and I couldn't find answers outside of me. I had coaches, I had psychics, and everything just felt flat. It was like nothing that you're touching actually is meeting the need that I have right now. And it doesn't mean that those mentors weren't supportive, but it wasn't touching that because, at the time, even more so than it is now, it was still like, don't talk about God. You can't say that, especially in the spiritual community. That's like the community where it feels like there's so much hurt there. So it was like the choiceless choice where everything's falling apart. And I was looking for God in everything. I was looking for God in books. I was looking for God in a mentor. I was looking for God in relationship. And it wasn't until I was on my knees, like Marianne Williams says in her book, Return to Love, which is like my favorite book because it's so simple and it's just like return to love. She talks about how she's on her knees and she's in prayer. And, instead of like getting up, she's like, why don't you just stay here? And I remember being in a flash of a moment and feeling like I don't have anywhere else to turn to externally. So I must go within. And so I must seek the answers within me. And that's actually where I found God, was not in a prayer externalizing, it was God within. And it was hearing the way that my voice like spoke through my heart and the way that the sensation of love felt like a warm hug around me. It wasn't anything that was external. And so it was like it was really difficult because I resisted it. I resisted the love. I felt unworthy. I felt like, I compartmentalized, how can I have a relationship with God and also be psychic and be an intuitive? Those things don't match. And then over time it became the only thing that actually satiated what I was looking for. It's like when you're hungry sometimes and like nothing will satiate you. It's like that's why I say it's a nutrient, because it felt like the only thing that satiated me was that. And then over years I just developed a practice. So every year, I'm a very devotional woman. I am at my altar. I am in prayer. I am doing practices. I am regularly like connecting throughout the day. And I think that everybody will have their own unique way of relating to God. There is no one way, but the three core themes, are our intention, our devotion, and our curiosity, and staying open and available, even in the midst of really challenging times. And I guess the fourth thing I'll say is if your life is so filled, don't expect you to be aware of how God is already working in your life, because God is always working in your life. But if you're on your phone in every elevator, on the toilet when you get up in the morning, if you're listening to music on your walks in your car, if before you go to bed at night you're reading, like I've found that really the words from spirit come in the silence, and that it's only in the silence was I actually able to hear the voice and to connect with God. And so it required me stripping away my obsession and also desire to learn. Like I love learning. So listening to music and learning it, I love it, but it really required a deep devotional practice to emptying, to, so that I could be filled. And so that's difficult for people because it's uncomfortable. And a lot of times emotions will come up and they might not have the tools to actually process and transmute and alchemize that energy. But ultimately, similar to the presence process, I have found that the simpler I have made my life, the more spacious I have made my life, the more the presence of God has worked through and I've made myself available for God to actually work through my life.
I love the idea of the divine, God being a relationship. Like, how do you, like you said in the beginning of this, like, how do you form your relationships? And I think that's actually part of the suffering, is that
Mhm.
we're trying to form our relationships based on being distracted and based on being extra busy. And I mean, me too, right? I'm definitely busy, and I think we all are. But I think that there's a mirror. It's the relationship to self, how you
Yeah.
said, like, well, I feel unworthy, and what if I bring this desire to be close to God and I don't feel worthy of being in relationship with something so beautiful. So there's that relationship to self, and then there's the relationship to our each other, and how we bring ourselves in our deepest relationships. Maybe we bring ourselves angry, maybe we bring ourselves broken.
Yeah.
And those are all reflections of how we enter into this relationship. And I think it is really interesting when we're trying to form this devotional practice and this commitment. How do you make your commitments in the world? Right? I know some people I work with that are like they always have one foot out the door.
Hmm.
Right? And so, like, what's your relationship to God? If you do have one foot out the door, how are you in and out? I mean, a lot of people think like God has forsaken me or God has left me or abandoned
Hmm.
me. And I am
Hmm.
the first one to say, but how have you abandoned God? How do you
Hmm.
abandon yourself? How do you abandon yourself in relationships? So I think it's very interesting because I don't think it's just an isolated relationship. I think that's kind of what you're saying is like you have this devotional practice and then and then you look at how you are in other relationships and it really reflects that. You
Hmm.
feel that. Um so I feel like one thing you said, which I'd like to hit on, is the idea of prayer. And it's such a loaded word, right? Because typically you think of prayer and you think of a prayer book.
Hmm.
And I think part of having a practice is to pray with your heart and your words.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are about that. And I'll say one more thing before I turn it over to you. I don't know if you've studied or you know at all about Teresa of Avila. Um,
Hmm. I do.
she was a mystic in the Spanish
Uh-huh.
Inquisition. She was
Yeah.
Jewish and she converted to Catholicism, and she's somebody that I mean, I believe she's one of my guides, and I love her deeply, and her relationship, like Rumi, her
Hmm.
relationship with God,
Same. Yeah.
yeah, it was like but it was like a real relationship. It reminded me of what you said. It's like some days I come to God and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
Hmm.
Right? Other days I'm like, "Thank you, thank you." But it's a relationship. And I think prayer is a big part of that. So I'm just curious your thoughts on prayer.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate this conversation. And I remember when we were in our program together, and I had not really spent a lot of time praying. And prayer was actually a really big part of what we did. I mean, I think we spent modules, like on prayer. And I remember asking Goose, and I was like, but how do I pray? And, his reflection back to me, which I'll always remember, was just like, there's no right way to pray. And that I have chills. That like
Yeah.
stuck with me
Yeah.
so hard because I think that, it's very easy to try to perform spirituality and try to perform deepening our relationship with God. That if I get it right, I will be rewarded. And if I get it right, it'll be deeper. And if I get it right, I'll be worthy. And I think that that's been a lot of my wounding also, interestingly enough, I just wrote a post yesterday about how, my greatest fear wasn't actually losing everything. It was actually the deepest pain that I felt was because I abandoned God. I turned away from God. And I just made that post yesterday.
Oh, interesting.
And so, yeah, there's like a
Mhm.
real,
Yeah.
synergy and synchronicity here in that because it's so true. I was like, I turned away from God. And prayer is one of the ways that I stay deeply connected because there's so many things you can do. You can read ancient scriptures, you can do all sorts of, whether it's mantras, whatever your devotional practice is, everybody's a little bit different. And I think we overcomplicate it, honestly. I was talking with a friend yesterday about different ways that we do emotional processing and alchemy, and he was talking about parts work and like all these things. And I'm like, I just think it's really simple. I think a lot of the things that we think of as like modalities or whatever, I think we overcomplicate them and then we stay in our mind, which actually disconnects us from our body, which I think is the greatest source of connection to God. So, when Goose told me there's no right way to pray, I stopped trying to do it right. And I just made it an everyday practice where whatever I'm saying is coming from my heart. And I do believe, I will say with that, I do believe that there are some ancient prayers that I come back to, like I've been studying Christian mysticism and like going back to like mystic, prayers where they connect with the divine. And I love Rumi also, so there's so many different ways that you can go back to templates that are already there. But if you're speaking from the mind, it's like you're not actually praying because it's got to come from like the deepest part of you. And, and something else that people have kind of gotten lost in is they think they use prayer for asking for more. It's just become this new manifestation process where you're just like, God, thank you for all the things you're bringing me in my life. And that's not to say that it's wrong or that you can't also use that. But I look at prayer as the conversation with God. That's it. It's very simple. Some days, it's just presence and I'm just holding my hands in a prayer mudra and I'm just like, connecting and just sitting here with my hands in front of my heart and I'm just bowing my head in gratitude. And there's just a level of reverence and humility that no words are needed. And that's my prayer. Some days there's prayer where I'm like, what is going on? I feel so lost. I feel so confused. I'm worried. I'm worried this is going to happen. And I'm not necessarily expecting other things. Sometimes it's questions, sometimes it's gratitude. Ultimately, it's just a conversation. And I think the greatest way to pray is to not expect any answer right away. Even though oftentimes I feel like I do receive something, whether it's like a message later or a synchronicity or just a level of grace. I think that people underestimate like that grace in your life, whether it's a feeling that you receive or like a miracle that happens, that those are answered prayers, and who knows when you prayed that prayer? That could have been years ago.
Right.
So I think it's very simple. I like to keep the sacred simple and I like to make the mystical practical so that people can actually digest this wisdom. And when it comes to prayer, I look at it as a conversation with God. I bring what I'm navigating, what I'm feeling to God, and I make myself open and available. It's not like hunched over angry, although I can bring that, but there's like, I'm speaking from here and not from here. And that's ultimately been my anchor point, and I pray multiple times a day. I love that you just prayed right before this podcast because I feel like, and praying over food and all of that, it just gives us a moment to like drop in to what we're doing, to the frequency that we're emitting, to the energy that's being created. Ultimately, I think prayer is a presence practice, just really bringing us back to the present moment. And if that's all that it is, it's profound in its simplicity. It doesn't need to mean that we like spend hours doing whatever. Like it's just a moment of connection. And I think that that is, why it's been the thing that I go back to out of all the practices that I have, which I have many. Prayer is the simplest and yet the most profound, primarily because I don't have to do it right. And I don't even have to do anything. It's just a moment of connection and presence, which creates, unlimited possibilities into our connection with God.
I love that. I have this vision of driving in a car and talking to God,
Yeah.
right? Like it's also it's movable. You don't have to do it in one, you can have an altar, you can have a space in your house, but prayer ultimately is a walking and breathing and living kind of relationship that I always also feel daily. I mean, in my own life right now, I've always had a deep prayer meditation practice when I wake up, and for the last like 8 months or so that has fallen away because of life circumstances. And at one point, I mean, it's still pretty sad to me, but also I know it'll come back, but I've I've meditated less and never felt more connected to God ever in my life,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so I love the idea of, if prayer is one of the devotional tools we use, can we break up the beliefs that we have to do it in a certain way and be in a marriage with God? And a marriage is always changing, always flowing. You're talking in the car, you're talking in the restaurant, you're talking daily. And I love this idea that you're bringing, that like it's a conversation and we make it really difficult. And but it's really just, it's just a love relationship with
Yeah.
something that you don't, you're right. I mean, it like a lot of people say, well, but it's, I can't feel God, I can't see God. And it's like a level of trust that when
Yeah.
you speak, you're not just speaking to the ethers, you're actually speaking to presence.
Yeah, I think the people we're all trying a little too hard in that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and I think that that's like part of the thing we're deconstructing is like we've translated like a hustle culture now to our relationship with God. And it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
got to go faster, harder, got to get,
Yeah.
there's still like, we still have that urgent frequency, these expectations, and
Mhm.
this real need to feel like God, we need to see God, or we
Mhm.
need to feel, but it's like, just tap into the like the energy, in whatever form it takes that day. Sometimes I have visions, sometimes I feel it, sometimes there's nothing, but it's a knowing.
Yeah.
We get attached to the form it takes, and as a born intuitive and a trained psychic, it's like that ultimately was one of the greatest things that got in my way. Was I was like, but I'm not seeing anything,
Right.
and then when you surrender and you let go to your expectation, or your attachment to what you think it needs to be like, it's like God can come through as a cardinal in the window and just look at you. It doesn't need to be something that you even feel and experience. It could be a miracle moment, but you're on your phone, you miss that little cardinal that was coming by and being like, hi, I'm here. And one of the things I want to share too, that's been my favorite practice, that is like prayer to me, has become movement, has become actual non-linear feminine expression and movement. And it's like my prayer in motion. And similarly, I've been noticing my devotional practices wanting to change. I've been doing a lot of meditation and prayer and singing and mantra and all the things. And lately, I'm more inclined now more than ever to just put on music, to take a breath, to drop into my intention, and just to say, how do you want to move through me today? And so for like, it could be 5 minutes where I'm just moving and I'm like not in my head. And I'm just like, so many things are happening. And I'm just like listening to my body and I'm moving. And then throughout the day, I'm carrying that prayer in motion. God, how do you want to move through me today? How do you want to move through me today? How do you want to move through me today? How do you want to speak through me today? So movement has actually become one of my greatest prayer practices as of late. And I feel like, especially as the feminine, I mean, we have with people with feminine bodies or who are cultivating more of their feminine expression, this can be for men also. I feel like the movement practice has really been something that's been missing. We talk, there's a long lineage of meditators, across ancient wisdom traditions, but there's also a lot of movement practices that have been lost as an art, that are reawakening, you know so I feel like that's kind of reemerging through this feminine awakening that's happening on the planet, of like, yeah, you can sit in prayer and meditation and, just be in stillness, but also God can move through you and wants to move through you. And that can shake things up and that can alchemize energy. And so I feel like that's also a practice that's really awakening on the planet, that's deeply rooted in ancient wisdom.
That's so beautiful. I feel like what you're saying, so many people are, we cut ourselves off, right? We live in our head
Yeah.
and we're afraid of what's in here.
Hmm.
And I also love it feels so simple what you're describing, because you don't have to get trained in it, right? You
Hmm.
don't need another training or a class
Yep.
or a book. You just turn on whatever music you like. I mean, I do it too. And sometimes it's like 70s music that I love, you know, and other times it's like deep devotional music, and it really doesn't matter. But how you like it, just allowing that through your body is bringing God into your body. And I think that is very feminine, and also the ability for the masculine to use it too. I think to
Hmm.
me, that's life changing. That's
Hmm.
a different form of prayer altogether.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love that you brought that up. I think that's really, really important. Yeah, it's beautiful. And right, and you're right, ancient as
It's
well.
so ancient. And I used to think that, a lot of the things that I talk about are so simple. And I used to doubt it because of that. I'm
Yes,
like,
it's
oh,
so
I just tell
simple.
people to dance or be present. Or,
Right.
one of the things that I've been doing lately with people who are coming to me for healing is not focusing so much on what I'm doing, but just as physically holding them or just
Mhm.
being present with them and not doing anything, but just channeling love to them and just asking God to use me as a vessel. And I used to think that this was like, oh, I'm not masterful because I'm not like doing
Yeah,
all this stuff, or
yeah.
it's not like a trained modality that I didn't get certified in for 3 years. And I have a lot of those credentials also. But when I come back to it, I'm like, think about some of the simplest of things that are so ancient, talking around the fire, dancing movement, being in nature, devotional practices, singing, You know, like these things have surpassed time and history and have been, you know, in history books and all these things, is not history books, but like historical text books, because they're valuable, they're real, they matter. And I think we've just gotten so lost in the sauce around like, like we got to be
Exactly.
qualified and credentialed. And that doesn't mean I don't agree with those things,
Right.
but I often think that we're really missing the mark. The truest sin, is to like overcomplicate it and try to do it right when actually, I've realized some of the most profound healing that's taken place in my own life and in the lives of my clients and people I work with and friends has been the simplest. When I'm not trying to do anything or perform spirituality, I'm just present. I'm listening. I'm asking God to move through me. Sometimes I'll say one word. Sometimes I'll say nothing. Sometimes I'll lay down. I'll put my hands on them. Like it's actually very simple.
I love that so much, especially in a world or in our heads that assume that we have to do more or to
Yeah.
be more or to say more. And I feel like it takes all the noise of all the things in the world that we read and we listen and we scroll about, and it pares it down to exactly what you said, which is ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly agree that like we're really going to need more of that, and connection is everything. um
Hmm.
and that is, it's so simple because I think we used to connect, right? And
Yeah.
we have so many advances in our world, and now we're going back to that space where it's like we really do need to sit around a fire. We really need
Yeah, we
it.
need to sit and bathe in the sun. We're trying to
Yeah,
biohack our way through like our spiritual
right,
evolution. And I'm not knocking that, but it's like get in the sun, put your feet on the ground, eat
yeah,
healthy, nutrient dense food,
right.
co-regulate, live in community, have
Mhm.
conversations, be vulnerable. Like these things have been written, these things have been preached by the shamans.
Right.
Laughter is also a form of
Great
connection to the
medicine.
divine. We take
Yeah.
this stuff too seriously sometimes. One of my old mentors said that he could tell the depth of devotion and connection to the divine by the sound, the deep belly laugh that his mentor would have. And I feel that like we're trying to make it too serious, too complicated. It's also a lot of times is very simple, and that doesn't mean that like complex trauma and all those things don't require other things, but day-to-day devotional practices like meeting our basic needs with the energies, the herbs, like everything that's already here. This is it's already here. It's already available. We don't have to go very far.
Definitely. um to kind of close it, I'd love to hear, hold on one second. Let me find my question. I think what you said is like there's a book, it's called God of Small Things or God in the Small Things. And I would love to. I feel like it's a different podcast to hear about your pilgrimage this past summer, and like all of that is such a deep story. But I guess if you could just describe one teaching that you found on your journey this past summer, just one thing that has been kind of a guiding light for you to just kind of wrap up our conversation with God, what would that
Mhm.
be?
Yeah, let me tune in for a sec. There's so
Yeah.
many things because
Yeah.
it was like such a renowned experience. But yeah, the thing I want to say is that what I remembered was that I'm not broken. That a lot of my desire to work with coaches, to read books, to do healing was from the undercurrent that I'm broken and that I need to be fixed. And so I was trying to use meditation or plant medicine or the next teacher or whatever to fix me. I believe that it was all outside of me. And so I went really deep on like Hinduism and those practices and Kundalini and all that. And so there's like so much richness within that, but ultimately it kept coming back to like, child, you are already whole. You're not doing anything that is necessary for you to be love, for you to be loved, for you to be love. That all of this is just helping you remember what is already here. to help all that is not you fall away. And so, I think that we imagine that, a lot of us have this underlaying with spirituality or with personal growth, that it's like, this is going to fix me. This is going to be the thing. And that's a lot of what my life was. This next supplement is going to fix my gut. And, there's not to say that these things aren't helpful, but it's like that message from Michelangelo when he chipped away, uh, or Leonardo da Vinci when he chipped away Michelangelo, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
like he was asked, how did you sculpt him? And he just said, I chipped away at everything that was not him, essentially. And I think that that's what I remembered. It's like everything is just a chipping away of everything that is not you. So all these devotional practices, all of this is just a softening into the remembrance that you are whole. You have always been, you are currently, and you will always be a child of God. And if you can remember that you are enough and that all of these things that you're trying to do to fix you are only like the intention that you come into them from matters so much. So if we can reorient ourselves to, I am already whole, I am already complete, that none of these things are actually going to heal me. I'm kind of over the word healing, to be honest with you, because
I
I'm
just
like
love that.
so yeah, I'm so beyond it because I
Same,
think that there's a
same.
trap in all of that. And
Yes,
I think that it's, that could be a whole podcast.
I
But
agree.
ultimately, it's to remember that you are already whole, you
Yeah.
are already complete, you are not broken, and that you are a child of God made perfectly. So, what an insult to God by pretending that we are trying to fix something that we believe is broken when we were made perfect to begin with.
Girl, I think you're on my website and my blogs and in my mind and in my heart. And I mean, it's
Uh,
exact, exact. I love that we've come back together and it's so synergistic.
yeah.
And I love the ideas about finding that, like, the search led you to what was always true, which is you are whole. And I feel like, just to end there, that is the most beautiful feeling to discover when you find a deep loving relationship with God, is that you remember how whole you are, and that you're never broken, no matter what has happened to you, no matter where you've been, what you've done, you're always whole. And so, my prayer for you is that you venture out into wherever life takes you, because you've been on such a path and a journey, but that you really go with, in Kabbalah, we talk about candles behind the eyes. And those
Mm.
candles behind the eyes, those are that's the seer, the one that knows that God guides the path. And so that you continue to have those beautiful candles behind your eyes, because I can see them and they're beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for
you.
seeing me and for like just giving us the space to have this
Mm,
conversation. It was
yeah.
really beautiful and I'm receiving your prayer and I'm just receiving the energy that's, so beautifully working in this space and in your heart and in your life. So I reflect that same prayer back to you, that you continue to be guided, that you have the courage to listen, and that you receive just this insurmountable, undeniable grace that is always available to you.
Thank you so much. Amen. Aho.
Yeah.
So, to be continued,
Yeah.
Carissa.
TBD. Many more to
Okay.
come.
Thanks, Carissa.